It's the Dean Legge Show. It is, what is it, Sunday the 16th? And I apologize for my technical issues here. These things happen from time to time, particularly when you're doing new technology, I guess you could say. But that's not your problem. It's mine, and I'm going to get it fixed sooner than later. And it's just very disappointing that one of the larger audiences I've got on Twitter won't be able to see some of the graphics I've got. But I'm gonna get it figured out with Wirecast here. Cost me a lot of money to get this right, Wirecast, so you will be hearing from me. Nonetheless, it is the Dean Legge Show, sponsored by Bank South. I really appreciate Bank South. I trust them in terms of banking. You should give them a shot too. They've got a lot of mortgages that they can talk with you about, mortgage situations. Obviously, CDs, deposits. If you're looking around for a checking situation, they're a good one. If you're having issues, I will try to fix them. I'm showing that I have sound, etc., but it's one of these days today. Hopefully everybody got through the hurricane with no real issues. Maybe you have in-laws in North and South Carolina like I do, and that was plenty to deal with for sure. Here's the thing. This is a pretty big game coming up. Missouri and Georgia. It will be a noon kick at Farrat Field here in Columbia, Missouri. A place that Georgia's not lost yet thus far. So it's an important game for Georgia, if for no other reason than keeping up pace with everybody else. Georgia right now the number 2 team in the country, according to the Associated Press. That's the poll that I've used consistently over time, and everyone's been using since 1936. So, or 19, yeah, I think it was. Well, anyway, you get the point. A big game for sure for the Dogs, and they are listed as a 15.5 point favorite. Let me double check and make sure that line is still at that spot, because I usually write, yeah, it's at 14 now, which is probably about right. 15 seems a little high, 15.5, but that still gives Georgia somewhere around an 87% chance of winning the game. So something like Steph Curry making a free throw, something like that. So that's Georgia's real, they're a 2-touchdown favorite on the road in the SEC, and that is a dramatic line for sure. I can't remember what the line for Alabama at Ole Miss was, but I think it was 21, so that's a pretty significant line too. And Ole Miss is just not that great. Here are my keys to the game, thanks to Bank South. Defend the run. Okay, so follow me here. This is a Missouri team that is predicated on the pass, and I think if you can stop the run pretty much completely, that means about maybe 80 yards for the entire game for Missouri. Missouri's going to have a hard time winning the game, because inevitably you do have to run the ball. I mean, you've got to run the ball. It becomes difficult to be 2nd and 10 all the time, or even holding 2nd and 20 or 3rd and 7. I mean, these are just difficult things to pick up. So for me, I think you're going to need to defend the run. The Bank South keys to the game. Sorry about slow on the graphic there. If you slow them down in the run game, or stop them pretty much, it's going to be a lot easier to do step number 2 here, the keys to the game, which is slow down Drew Lock. Now, a couple different things about Missouri. Obviously, I think you got to take them very seriously. If you do so, it's hard to think Kirby and them will not get this team ready to roll when they get to Columbia, Missouri. It's a game that Georgia should win, obviously, as a 14-point favorite, but Drew Lock scored some points against Georgia last year on some coverages that weren't so hot for Georgia. This secondary seems to be improved over last year. I'm one of the people who also thinks that the defensive line is going to have to play better, particularly in the interior, but they've really done their job. I mean, if you, I know I'm kind of getting sidetracked here, but the defensive line has, for the most part, done its job against South Carolina in the first game of the year. But this past week, I think Georgia played a little bit sloppy, generally speaking. That doesn't really fall on the defensive line. They got hit with a screen pass for a touchdown, so Middle Tennessee got down the field and scored a touchdown like that. But for the most part, the defense has done its job. They've only had, I think, they've only had 24 points scored against them. That's not a lot of production. So when you go into a game like you've got with Missouri, one thing you get concerned about is, they're going to light you up. They're going to light you up. Well, not if they can't run. I mean, and I get back to this. Again, 3rd and 7, those are passing downs. It becomes tough to convert those all the time. So you really do need to get them into 2nd and 8 situations or 2nd and 10, and then maybe get it to 3rd and 5, and you can play ball then. If teams are running on you, you have a real problem, of course, stopping the run. And as you can see, when the opposition tries to stop Georgia, it becomes really tough. So I think if you defend the run, which is the number 1 Bank South key to the game, and then you move on to number 2, which is slow down Drew Lock, number 2 will happen if you do number 1. So you play 1st and 2nd down with the ability to stop the run. Missouri really should not be able to run on Georgia. And then finally, Missouri's defense just barely held on against Purdue this past week. Missouri had to get a field goal at the end of the game to win it. It was a 40-37 fight over at up in Purdue. Look, the Georgia that I have seen over these last 18 games is not going to goof around with a team like Missouri. They are going to smash them in the mouth, run the ball, make them pay, and Missouri can score. They're scoring more than almost anybody in the league outside of Alabama, who scored 53 times, and Georgia, who has only been under. Have they been under 40? I don't think Georgia has been under 40. So this is not going to be a shootout. This is going to be Georgia scoring 40 and Missouri probably scoring 20-ish. 23, 24, 28. Georgia scores 42. So if you want to get into the betting game, you can. But you just kind of better watch it. It's one of those games where on the road, things don't always work as functionally as you would like. But again, the beating Georgia put on South Carolina, a tough place. It can't be everything at once. Like if Georgia was accomplished enough to beat South Carolina on the road in a tough environment, they will be able to beat Missouri on the road in an environment that's not as difficult. Okay, so it can't be that everything's constantly a test. I mean, one of these things have to be. One of these have to be more difficult than the other. And I think we're seeing right now the most difficult thing that's going to be coming up later this season is this trip to LSU. LSU, I don't think they're going to win the West. I do not think they're going to win the league. I do not think that they are going to go undefeated. I do not think that they are as good as Georgia. I do not think they're as good as Alabama. But they can beat both of those teams. They just won't beat both of those teams. And that's something that if you're Georgia, you're watching that LSU Auburn game last night, I guess you could say. There was plenty to be concerned about in terms of the straight up physicality of LSU. So, yes, I'm looking forward. My job, I'm not on the team. I don't work for the university. That's their problem. My thing is to talk about what people want to hear about. They're not going to want to hear about Tennessee until next week. They certainly do not think they certainly don't want to hear about Vanderbilt. So we're going to talk a little bit about Missouri. And then I was impressed with LSU. They certainly deserve to be top 6. They probably should be number 4 or 5. I think Clemson, you got to drop them down. They're just not playing as well as they have been or should be. Certainly not to be the number 2 team in the country. So Clemson's got to, I think we got to let Clemson get it together before we move them up. Ohio State looked okay, and then they exploded, so they look good. Alabama is clearly the best team in the country. I think Georgia's probably the second best. After that, it becomes Oklahoma or Ohio State. I think you go LSU probably after that, maybe Clemson. LSU's got 2 quality wins so far. They're a big, physical, brutal team. Big, physical, brutal is the person that is our dog post Bank South player of the game. And Elijah Holyfield played really well. It was his first 100-yard game for the Dogs. Elijah looked really good. That long run obviously was a key. If you're on Facebook or on YouTube right now, you can see the long run from Elijah. He just really took off. Didn't take it to the house, but that run pretty well ended the game. I think that run led to the 14-0. It might have been 7-0. I'm not sure, but Middle Tennessee just had nothing for Georgia after that. So Elijah is our Bank South player of the game. Thought he really, 100 yards is not nothing. And with the limited carries that DeAndre Swift got, it was good to see Elijah Holyfield get out there and continue to just pound. Georgia's run for more than 250 yards every single game this season. They probably will run for that many against Missouri this weekend. Look, I have a hard time thinking Georgia loses this game. I do think there could be some doubt, like in the third quarter or something like that. But I just think the running game from Georgia is too much. We'll see if Andrew Thomas gets back. A lot of people are asking me about DeAndre Swift. So after the game, and you could see this in all the stuff that we post on YouTube and on Dog Post. If you're not a member of Dog Post, you're making a mistake. It's $1 for 30 days. Go check it out. DAWGPOST.com. You could read about Xavier Truss, a free article right now, the committed player from Rhode Island. You don't know anything about him because you're probably from Georgia or the South and have never seen him play. But, Dylan Weber went up there a couple weeks ago, has a very good, lengthy article about Xavier Truss. But the point I'm trying to make here is that this team is going to run and run and run. Kirby, after the game, didn't say anything about DeAndre Swift being out because of injury. He said he got the first few carries, and then we just didn't feel like he needed to be in the game after that. I'm paraphrasing. So I think that they said, all right, he maybe got popped a little on his head. Let's be careful here. He doesn't have to play in this game for us to win. He's not going to play in this game for us to win. We're just going to go ahead on and move on. So you get the Bank South player of the game. Elijah Holyfield goes for 100 yards. It was good. Now, I'll get back to my whole spiel here, which is Georgia doesn't, there's not like they're unbelievable. There's nothing unbelievable about this team. They're just really steady. And, people who are watching this right now, they sort of know where the holes are with Georgia. Having watched Alabama now twice, not the middle game, Alabama has some holes too. Namely at an important spot, which is in the kicking game. They're not consistently good at place kicking for sure, and you don't want to be searching. That nearly cost them a national championship last year. So you don't want to search for those things midway through a season. It's too late, kind of. So I think Georgia is steady in all aspects of their program. I just think, generally speaking, Alabama is the better team right now. Everybody is very impressed with Tua. He has played well. We will see what happens when they get into a little bit more competitive situation. We're going to be 4 weeks into it here, and Georgia will have played probably a little bit more competitive schedule than Alabama. Louisville is really bad. So, I don't know how much you can put up that game. Mississippi is not that great either. So Georgia will have played South Carolina and Mizzou. I'm curious to see the Mississippi State Kentucky game. That is an interesting game for the upper middle part of the conference, not the upper part of the conference, but the upper middle for sure. State, I think, wants to make sure that they're going in the same direction. Kentucky wants to get to 4-0 probably for the first time in forever because they're always playing the Gators. So, and then, of course, this week's Tennessee, Florida. And there's just not much to say about that game. The loser obviously is in real trouble. Real trouble. I expect Florida to win that game. Let me see what the line is on that. But, for Georgia, if you just go handle business in Columbia, Missouri, you basically have 2 weeks to gussy up and get ready for the LSU game. Yeah, it's probably 2.5 weeks, maybe not 3 full weeks, but the Gators are a 5-point favorite on the road in Knoxville. I mean, I think Florida will probably win that game. I think Kentucky and South Carolina are probably the second and third best teams in the league, in the division. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but I mean, Kentucky really did just take Florida and beat them up physically. I don't think Tennessee can do that to them. Tennessee is, I said on Tuesday that the UTEP game would tell us a lot about Tennessee. They struggled. I mean, they didn't give up a score, but they had a hard time scoring. And neither of those, I mean, like, not scoring is a real problem in today's college football. So, and that's a problem that Mizzou does not have. They have the ability to score. The question is, do they have the ability to score against a defense the likes of which they've not seen, which is Georgia? I mean, the other thing that I keep thinking about and haven't spit this out yet is getting these emotional wins on the road, coming down to the last second like they did against Purdue. It's a big win. Anytime you win like that, it's a big deal. The next week to turn around and play at noon, at home, 11 o'clock at home against a top 5 team, that is going to be a challenge for Missouri because everybody's patting them on the back. If they win this game, they are in very good shape, obviously, in the East. I still don't think they win the East if they beat Georgia, but they are in very good shape. But again here, the Bank South keys to the game. If you're on YouTube, you can see this. If you're on Twitter, I'm going to figure it out soon enough. Don't worry. Defend the run, number 1. Number 2, slow Drew lockdown. Number 3, score at will. Missouri can't stop Georgia. That's going to be the problem. Is they don't have the ability to stop Georgia, and I think that Drew Lock and Missouri for the most part, has pretty much scored some points against Georgia. I mean, 12. They only scored 20, but they got out to like a 20-12 lead or whatever it was. In 2013, they scored a lot. 2014, they didn't score at all. And in 2015, that was the worst football game I've seen. Just that game needed to end. It needed a running clock. It was so bad. That 9-6 Grayson Lambert disaster. That was horrible football. But Missouri for the most part has scored. Generally speaking, in this league, I'm not sure if they're going to have the ability to score against this Georgia team. The way that they're going to need to, because their defense is not going to be able to hold on with Georgia. I mean, they're going to need Georgia to make mistakes. Jake Fromm's going to make mistakes. It happens on the road, but that's just 7. Let's just say it's 7 points. I'm not sure that that's going to make a difference. So if you're, if you are a betting person, 15.5 to me was too much. 14, that's a little bit different because now you're starting to talk about, 2 touchdowns, you kick a field goal and you're done. 15.5, and maybe it's like a psychological thing for me. I don't like halves. 14, that's a different situation for me completely. I think Georgia in 14 will probably cover that line. But I do think it's possible this game be a game now, not Georgia's losing, a game in the third quarter. Maybe Georgia is up 7 or 10 at the half. Maybe they're up 3 at the half. But if you're not going to have the ability to run the ball, and I think Missouri will struggle to do that, then it's going to be hard to beat these dogs. Now they're not as dominant on the front, front 7, front 4 as they were last year. But they continue to throw people at you. I mean, it's seemingly never ending. And that's why I sort of get surprised when teams score double digits. The lower level teams score double digits against Georgia because they're throwing 3 units worth of defense out there at you during the entire game. These are all scholarship guys for the most part. Say 90% scholarship guys are playing defensively. It's not surprising that they don't score. It's not surprising at all. I mean, South Carolina should score at home, and one of those was junk at the end of the game. But, it's this is a good Georgia team. They're solid. It's not surprising. We've seen this a lot. You know, a lot of people are talking about this right here, which is this noon kick, which it's going to be 11 o'clock local. You know, 11 o'clock local is not ideal. It's ideal for me. Boy, I wish Georgia would play 11 o'clock or even 10 a.m. I'd be all over that. We'd be in, we'd be out, we'd be done. I wanted them to play at night for this Middle Tennessee State game. I think they still could have done that, as it turns out. But, you know, it was fine that they played at noon. We were done with everything by 8 o'clock that night, thankfully. Usually the games were much worse for us than that. You know, Farad Field can get sort of loud, but it's not they are not right on top of you. There's almost a track around the stadium. It's not a real track. It's a kind of concrete track. I'm sure most of y'all have probably not been out there because I've only been in the league for 3 trips out there. But it's not the worst place to play. The end zones, for the most part, you are not going into fans. And if you are, a corner of that part of the stadium are your fans. So if you're going towards the rocks, what I was calling the rocks, it's just people sitting on a hill. So it's not like it's completely nuts. Well, you know, someone's pointing something out here that I do probably need to say is that both these teams are going to come out of the same tunnel, which is strange, and it's going to be they're going to be separated by chain link fence. Yeah, that's not a good sign or look. I think Missouri needs to kind of get that all figured out and situated. But, you know, I expect Georgia to probably come out last. They've been doing that a lot. They did that at South Carolina. You know, I think they've been coming out last at home. But they're not going to get into any pregame stuff. I mean, this is not that 2015 team that was too excited. These guys come out, they whip your ass, and then they leave. They're not interested. They typically don't talk a lot on the field. I'm on the field for the games. They typically do not talk a lot on the field. So the personality of this team is, you know, do it between the whistles, and there's no talking after that. I remember very clearly the captains for the South Carolina game, they didn't say anything from them to one another or anything. They weren't talking at all. There was no, you know, yeah, false bravado. I don't like false bravado, man. I like quiet teams. There have been some discussion here about Justin Fields playing. Justin is definitely going to play, it looks like, in every single game, no matter what. And I think that's good. I mean, he looked good on Saturday to me. He was he was effective throwing the ball. These quarterbacks are very good. Someone said, I was listening to, it was Sean McDonough, and I can't remember, well, maybe it wasn't Sean McDonough. Someone was saying, a national guy, saying that Alabama has the best quarterback situation. I'm not sure it's Georgia. I mean, it might be Georgia. Because Jalen Hurts definitely is up and down when he played last year. He's not overwhelmingly dependable with the pass. Georgia's 2 guys. It would be interesting to see Fields play a little bit more with the bullets flying against, you know, at South Carolina, maybe this week against Mizzou. But these 2 guys are very gifted. They're good, no doubt, no doubt about it. And their offensive line is giving. I mean, their offensive line gives them the type of protection that you're going to get at Bank South with your money, okay? Bank South's going to take care of you. These deposits, obviously FDIC insured, etc. You want a mortgage? Take a look at the housing market. You should definitely go check out Bank South Mortgage. I'm not just saying this stuff. They help us. They help Dog Post. They know what it's like to help small business. You should give them a look. But the protection on the offensive line at Georgia is giving Jake Fromm the ability to literally survey the field, go through progressions. There are times when guys he throws to are totally wide open. Totally wide open. It's insane. That should not be happening at the Division I football level. It should not happen in Division II. it's an impressive group out there. And here's the question too: is will Andrew Thomas be back this week? I would get him out there as quick as you can. You don't want particularly big guys to forget what it's like to play. Obviously, he's played 18 games in college football. He's not going to forget how to play, or 16 games in college football. 17, what am I talking about? So, but you do want Andrew out there as much as you can. He's the starting left tackle. Cade Mays is their number 6 guy, it looks like. They're going with that beefy lineup. Cade had an okay game. He had one of those games where, if you're a left tackle, sometimes you're just going to get beat. It happens. That's what happened on that Fromm fumble where Ben Cleveland jumped on the ball. Elijah Holyfield. Two guys met at Jake Fromm, caused an issue. That could have led to an easy score, but Ben jumped on the ball quickly and got the job done there. And Georgia took it from there 49-7 over Middle Tennessee State. I don't know if it's hard to know what to really expect beyond Georgia winning this game solidly. I'm having a hard time getting there because of the big guys. I think this race seems more and more like Georgia and Alabama with a collision in Atlanta. Maybe LSU will have something to say about that. Auburn now, your problem, I hadn't talked about Auburn at all. Your problem now, if you're Auburn, you got to run the table completely. Alabama's not going to lose 2 games. So you're going to need to run the table completely. That involves beating Georgia and Alabama on the road. I just don't see it. I think LSU could beat Alabama or Georgia. I don't know that they'd be favored to beat either of them. Maybe now LSU will be more like a 2-point dog at home. But I think that this does seem more and more like a collision in Alabama. It's so funny, too, to see the Alabama fans are really either nervous about Georgia or something, because they cannot barely go through a Twitter feed without mentioning Georgia. They don't play. They're not scheduled to play one another this season. Georgia, it looks like, will get to Atlanta. LSU can lose to Georgia, beat Alabama, and get to Atlanta. That's how that works. I don't see Bama losing twice. I see Bama losing probably 1 game this season if they lose that, and we'll just see what happens. They're good, but they're beatable. They are definitely beatable, particularly with those kickers. That is just not great. And then finally here tonight, a lot of questions about the pass rush. Look, they're going to have a hard time rushing the passer if the kid's getting the ball out of his hands in the first 2 or 3 seconds. They're just, that's why you stop the run. Because guys are not going to complete passes. And if you're sitting there in 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 7, you're not going to convert the first down. And if you do, it's going to be one of the 4 times you do it the entire game. So it's just the pass rush thing. I get it, I understand, but I think folks should realize that if guys are going to get the ball out as quick as some of these quarterbacks are getting it out, you're just not going to get pressure on them. In many ways, if you remember the 15 Bama game, they didn't pressure the quarterback. They made him sit in the pocket, and the pocket went from this to this. And it's much more difficult when you can't step into a throw. It's much more difficult when you have 3 arms in the air trying to block you at 5-foot range rather than stepping up into the pocket. If you can't step up into the pocket, you got a problem. You can't throw the ball. Then all of a sudden you don't need a pass rush because they can't throw it. So there's a lot of different ways to win sports. In basketball you can do hurry up. You can be deliberative. We were deliberative at Coker. In tennis you can be serve and volley, although that hardly happens anymore. There's different ways to win sports, and the number one thing is to score more than the other person. Everybody's being pretty nitpicky right now about this pass rush at Georgia. They want to turn DeAndre Walker loose. They can do that at any time. That's not a problem. The point is to get off the field. It doesn't always have to result in a sack. And that Leonard Floyd and those guys were really, really good at that. You don't always have to play that way. Join me Tuesday night. This has been Dean Legge on the Dean Legge Show.